As you work in Excel, and whether you're actually creating a spreadsheet or you're just maybe doing data entry in a spreadsheet, you'll find that you are entering the same kind of information in a column just over and over and over again. And if you're creating a spreadsheet that has a column like that, what you might want to do is make sure that you have consistent spelling, for example, or consistent capitalization of what is in that column. And one of the ways that you can do that is to create a drop-down list where people choose from the items in the list. It is such an easy way to make sure that your data is valid. Well, hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and today let's look at Excel and how to create drop-down lists. Looking at our small example today, we can see that it's some list of employees because we can see its last name, first name, and then we have title and department. And one of the reasons why I would want to have a drop-down list is to make sure that the entries within a cell are valid. And certainly there is so much room for error when we manually enter something like a title. It would be very easy to transpose a few letters, leave off a capital letter, or add one when it's not supposed to be there. Same thing with department. We might forget the name of the department exactly and so kind of make up our own. And then when it comes to sorting or filtering, that isn't going to work quite right because our data isn't quite right. So what we really want to do is make sure that things like our title and department don't leave room for error, that we give the entry person absolutely the best advantage possible for being accurate. And so to do that, we'll start with Juan Archer here in C4. And what we want to do is create a drop-down list. Now, there are two different ways to create a drop-down list. One way is to create it just sort of manually on the fly. And I'm going to suggest that that would be for smaller lists. Or what we can do is use data, format it as a table, and then use that formatted table to be our drop-down list. Let's start by looking at how we can add in a pre-created table. So it's one source that we will edit if we need to, and as we edit that pre-created existing table, it will automatically update our drop-down list as well. But there's one thing that we need to do to make that happen. So let's go to Sheet 2, where I have this list of titles, and what I need to do to make this all work is to select all of those entries, and then what I want to do is go to the Home tab, and just a little bit to the right of center, we have the Styles group. Now within the Styles group, we have the Format as Table button, and we need to use it to make sure that our information here in column A is really defined as a table. So all I need to do is click on that drop down for Format as Table, and I have all of these different choices, but for a drop down list, I'm not going to worry about it too much here. I think I'm just going to choose the first choice, which is Table Style Light 1, and click on it. And then I need to be sure that the data is correct, and this says A1 through A18. That's correct. And my table does have a header, titles, and so that's correct. So I'm going to click OK. And so it's interesting that I now have this formatting, but let's go to Sheet 1, and as I go to C4, I now want to use that list that I've formatted as my drop-down list as well. So to do that, we need to go to a different tab. So we're going to go again above the ribbon, and we're going to go to about the 5th tab here, which is Data. And from the Data tab, what we want to do is go over to the right to the Data Tools group. And on my laptop, it's really a lot of small buttons, but they are really powerful. What we are looking for is this button that has the check mark and the Ghostbusters line through it. So it means that yes, it's either approved or it isn't approved. And when we click on that drop down, it even says this is called data validation. Yes, this is correct, or no, it isn't. And then it gives us some choices of what to do with that. But for today, for the most part, we'll just go to data validation. And we don't necessarily need to put in an input message or an error alert. We're just going to stick with this first tab, settings. And what are we going to allow? Well, we're not going to allow just any value. We're going to click on the drop down and we're going to say list. And then from here, we need to say where that list is. So I need to click where it says source, and I can go over to the right where I have that up pointing arrow, and it takes me just back to my worksheets where it's easier to find them. Well, let's come down to the bottom left where we have sheet 2, and we have that list, and then we'll just click on A2 through A18. And then as we look at that data validation box, you can see that the button on the right has turned to an arrow that's pointing down, which basically means we're going to expand this box. We'll click on it. And so now we have that this is sheet 2, A2 through A18. That seems to be right. And then we're going to click on OK. Now, look at this. We have Juan Archer, and to the right of where it says title, we have a drop-down arrow. And so I can click on the drop-down, and it gives me all of the possible titles for Juan Archer. Now, before I do that, though, I want to copy that list to everyone who is listed here on this worksheet. So I want to go to the fill handle and click and drag down. And it will copy, as I click on those cells, that same list all the way down that column. Now, isn't that intriguing? So Juan Archer might be the accounts payable clerk, and Terry Berry, executive assistant. And Peter Bradford, let's make him an account manager, and Elizabeth Colon, business administrator. And I can just go down the list. Everything is spelled for me exactly the way it needs to be spelled. Now let's try this. As we look at Alonzo Cordova here, we know that the very first choice is account manager, and then we have accounts payable clerk. Let's make that accounts payable clerk 1 and change our table a little bit. So let's go to sheet 2. We have accounts payable clerk. Let's make that 1. Then I should be able to insert a row that says accounts payable clerk 2. Now let's go back to our sheet 1 and look at Alonzo Cordova here. It automatically carried over and updated so that I can again have accurate information, editing the table one time as opposed to coming into this column and every time we have an accounts payable clerk going in and adding a 2 for everyone who's a 2 and a 1 for everyone who's a 1. And it makes life just so much easier. That was using the list that is then formatted as a table to create our drop-down list. A couple of things to note before we go on, and that is while my update for accounts payable clerk 2 worked beautifully, look at what happened here with accounts payable clerk, who should be maybe accounts payable clerk 1. That did not change. So I need to actually click on it again and click the drop down, and then I can select it. But just a note that you may need to go back, and when you update a table, be sure that you kind of double check to make sure that everything updated with it. The other thing that we might want to look at is this. In a previous video, we talked about protecting cells and protecting sheets. And since this list is so important to how your worksheet works, you may decide to protect the cells here in this titles list to make sure that nobody overwrites it. Now let's look at how we could manually create a list rather than drawing from a table. And so in D4, we're going to make a very short list of departments that we can select from. I'm already at the Data tab, and we know that we need to go to the Data Validation button, so I'll just click on it and then Data Validation. And the difference is how we pull in the data. So where it says Allow Any Value, we're going to click on that drop down. And again, we're going to say that we want to allow a list, but this time the source is simply typed in. So for the department, I might type in administration, comma, no spaces, and then accounting, comma, and one more, marketing. And click on OK. And when we click on the drop down, we can see that we have these three departments. Well, let's copy this down though using the fill handle so that everyone has those same three choices, and then I can click and choose the different departments as I go through. You want to be careful to create the list, make sure you have the drop down and it's working correctly, and then use the fill handle to copy it down before you make any choices. And then we can go through, and that's very easy. Now let's say that we have a company party and we want to know if people are going to attend. So very quickly, let's manually create another list. Let's go back to Data Validation and then Data Validation, and we're going to allow a list, and our list is simply yes, comma, no, comma, maybe. And then we'll click OK, and we'll copy that down. We're going to ask Juan Archer here if he's coming or not, and he's going to say yes. And then the next person is a maybe, and then the next person is a no, etc. Well, let's say that the party is now over. There's really no need to have a drop-down list. They've either replied or they haven't. And it could be that maybe while you don't need the drop-down list any longer, you for some reason still want to preserve the information. Let's select those cells with data validation boxes, and then we're going to go to data validation. And what we can do to preserve the information but get rid of the drop-down box is to come down to clear all, and then we'll click OK. So yes, we still have the yes, we still have the maybe, we still have the no, but we no longer have that drop-down arrow. There's no list to choose from. So you may find that that could also be helpful, and you may even decide when you do this that this would be a case where you'd want to protect cells as well. But that is creating drop-down lists in Excel. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.